thank you all for coming to our event, People's Voices on the Crisis. My name is Jana Silverman. I'll be hosting the event tonight. I'm from an organization, an international network of civil society organizations called Social Watch. And basically to give you an idea of why we're here. I think you all know why we're here, actually. I don't think I have much to say. As you know, there's been this, since last year, there's been a lot, obviously in the news, especially in the financial media, talk, speculation, predictions about the crisis, where it's going, what's going to happen. But it's always on a level of discourse that talks about, well, what's happening in the stock exchange? What's happening to the bankers on Wall Street in the city of London and Sao Paulo that are losing their bonuses? But the discourse hasn't come down to level to see the effects that this crisis is concretely having for ordinary working people, men and women around the world. And in places not just like Wall Street or the city of London, but also places like South Africa, Sudan, San Salvador, and the South Bronx. So that's why we're here today, to give voice to the voiceless, to let our voices be heard. Because we know that the corporate media has their agenda, and they're very much trying to project now that this crisis is starting to end. But when we look at what's going on in the reality in most of the developing world, the crisis is actually just beginning. We're just beginning to see some of the social, environmental, and labor impacts of this crisis. And what we are seeing is that it's not just a financial and economic crisis, it's a systemic crisis. It's a crisis that's not just affecting our pocketbooks, but it's affecting the planet itself. So the idea is to use this space today to share our experiences, hear how people's lives and livelihoods are being impacted around the world by this systemic crisis, and then also talk about what we can do about it. What are our ideas? What can we as civil society activists do both on a local, national, and global level? Because we think that this is a dialogue that's we haven't been able to have because I think we as activists have been so shocked by this crisis, by the profoundness of this crisis, that we've been put into a panic. We haven't even had time to think and analyze. So the idea is that, as much as we can today, use this space to put out these proposals and brainstorm and see actually what can be our next step forward. And concretely, in terms of a next step forward, we also want to put sort of on the agenda of the social movements, both here in New York and around the world, the importance of a UN conference that's scheduled to take place starting this Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, right here in New York, which is the first actual real forum that will allow all countries, both developed and developing countries, to have a voice in proposing solutions to this systemic crisis. And this is a conference that has been getting bad-mouthed in the business press and in the major media, such as the New York Times, that the countries, such as the European countries and the United States, have been trying to dismiss it and wanting to bring all the discussions about the crisis back to forums that they control, like the G20 and the G8 and the IMF and the World Bank. And what we want to say at this meeting is that we don't accept this exclusionary kind of process. We want all voices to be heard. But the voices of civil society, the voices of developing countries, because if we're the ones feeling the immediate impacts, we have the right and the obligation to have our voices to be allowed to propose solutions. So just to give you a quick rundown of the agenda, well, before that, I'd also like to give a very, very, very deep thanks to all the organizations that have helped make this day a reality. As you can see on the back of your agenda, you can see there's quite a large list of sponsoring organizations, networks, both from New York City, from around the country, and around the world. So I also want to definitely invite people, first of all, thank everyone for making the effort to come here, to organize, to letting people know about this event. And I hope that, at the conclusion of the event, we can sort of use the space also for some informal conversations within ourselves, because I think it is a really wonderful opportunity to have so many people from around the world together with the same common goal, which is finding a rights-based solution to the systemic crisis. So just to go briefly down the agenda, we're waiting in a few minutes. Father Miguel de Escoto Brockman, who's the current president of the UN General Assembly, will be arriving to give a few words as the beginning of this event. Obviously, for those of you who may not know, Father Miguel, who's a Nicaraguan, proudly Sandinista liberation theology priest, is basically the person who's been pushing for this UN conference to take place and pushing for developing countries and, you can say, the developing world within the developed world to have a voice in finding solutions to the crisis. So I think it'll be really very interesting to hear what he has to say. And then going down the agenda, we've organized it as a series of thematic panels looking at how different kinds of human rights and social rights are being impacted by the crisis. So we have the first panel on gender rights. You can see we have speakers from Brazil, Sudan, Benin, and Bulgaria. Then the next panel will be about the situation of how the rights of indigenous peoples and people of color here in the United States and also around the world are being impacted by the crisis. And we have speakers from local organization here in New York. We will also have speakers from Colombia and a special report back from Peru, which, as many of you will hear about more in depth, but as many of you may already know, there's been a recent genocide against indigenous people living in the Amazon region who are trying to defend their land from a model of from the government, which wants to extract oil and other non-renewable energy sources while destroying their habitats and their livelihoods. So we're going to hear about a report back directly from Peru. And then we'll have a space for some discussion, and then we'll have the next panel on the issue of the right to decent work and economic security. And so we'll have someone from the International Trade Union Confederation to give us a more global picture about how labor rights are being impacted, and also hear stories about how here in New York that those rights are being directly affected. Not just the right to work, but also the rights at work. Then we'll have the panel on social rights, which obviously comprise a wide range of rights, such as the right to education, the right to housing, the right to health care, the right to Social Security. And we'll have speakers from places not only the United States, but also to understand what's going on in places like Kenya, Nepal, and Europe. Because as we know, the European countries and people in Europe have been deeply affected by the crisis as well. And then our final thematic panel will be on the issue of environmental sustainability, because we know that this crisis is not just affecting people, but is also deeply affecting the planet itself. So we'll have speakers from El Salvador, and also from here in New York, from New Orleans, and from other parts around the world to talk about not just how the environment is being impacted by the crisis, but also what kind of solutions are being proposed so that environmental sustainability becomes an integral part of any solution to the crisis. And then we'll finish off with a final panel with some civil society activists, both locally and nationally and internationally, to give their remarks, basically summing up what we've heard, drawing out some conclusions, and proposing some ideas so we can think of a way forward to end this crisis. And there'll be discussion sessions. We want this to be as interactive as possible.